So, Alan, are you seeing anything? So we don't know if it's working or not, but it probably is working somewhere, sometime.
Is there a place to go on LinkedIn to find out?
LinkedIn, you can go to LinkedIn. I can't because it's me. And more. I don't.
Let me do this.
Okay, but this is it's supposed to be from this page. Well, we can talk, and hopefully it'll work. And you are muted.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, it's live. Alan found it. All right, so I've known you for probably 20 years. And
Yes.
You've been on the same side of issues as I've been on the opposite side of issues I've been on over the years. All of the experts I know, you're the one I respect the most, and I think that's pretty good. So I wanted to talk to you today about Section 230. Introduce yourself to people who might not know you.
So I am currently the CEO of Iggy Ventures, which is a kind of venture capital firm that get into investing in companies that are trying to solve a societal problem. But prior to that, for 15 years, I was the director of e-commerce, the senior vice president of government affairs for News Corp and Fox. And before that, the director of e-commerce and technology for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And then I worked firm doing tech policy from almost 94 to 99. Before that, I worked up on Capitol Hill. So I've been doing tech policy for a very long time. Watching the internet grow, and that's how I got to meet you, Parry.
I know, it's been a long time. I remember when we hosted that event at the U.S. Senate that was run by the kids. You were there on behalf of MySpace. And,
Yes.
and Facebook was just starting. It just was there. And
Yes.
everybody was asking Facebook about Facebook. And finally, one of the kids raised their hand and said, I have a question about MySpace. And you stood up very proudly to finally have a question about MySpace. And these were the days when MySpace was sort of falling out of favor. And she looked at you and she said, why can't MySpace be more like Facebook? And I think for all under the table. And you were
a lot of reasons that we weren't going to be like Facebook. Obviously, the different graphic that we were looking at, but the big thing was, in my view, that Facebook really kind of pulled the wool over people's eyes. In the day, Facebook would say, "Oh well, we're safe because you can only sign up with Facebook because you have a .edu email address." And we all knew that if you have a .edu email address, it didn't mean that you weren't going to do something horrible online. So there's a lot of, they did a great job of marketing themselves as more of the elite versus MySpace, which was really open to everybody. The big difference from an internal perspective, though, is that with Rupert and others within the company, we took making MySpace safe very seriously. You know, we shot down features and functionalities of MySpace that would make it very sticky. But because we couldn't figure out how to make it safe for our users, we decided not to. We were not moving fast and breaking things. That was not our mantra, like other companies. And so I think that put us at a competitive disadvantage. I heard that a lot from our guys, but we weren't going to sacrifice the safety and security of our users for profit. I think that really differentiated us, and other companies did, and they became very large.
And here we are 14 years later, and in the crosshairs is Facebook and a number of the others. So we're talking about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. I'll do my short intro, and you can do the smart one. So before this law came out in 1996, there were two lines of cases. One said that an online provider was a publisher and therefore responsible for anything that appeared on their networks, in the same way that publishers had control over their authors and could edit and could fact check, and they had a financial stake in this. At the same time, there was another line of cases that said you're a bookseller. You don't really know what's in the book that you're selling. You don't have control over it. There's not a big profit interest here. You couldn't possibly control the information that occurs within this. And so Section 230 was originally designed to determine if a provider was liable for defamatory remarks made by others. And it came down through the statute that they were seen as a bookseller and not liable, and it gave them absolute immunity for what we thought at the time was just defamation. And now, where are we today?
Right. And well, even a little bit more context, you have to remember this was part of the Communications Decency Act. This wasn't the ISP Immunity Act. You know, this was supposed to incentivize behavior. The goal of CDA was not to only allow for the bulletin board services at that time, CompuServe, Prodigy, and AOL as a big player, to positive action, be proactive in fixing the problems on their side without being fearful of liability. We never intended it to be a complete shield from the community. So you can do whatever you want and get away with it as long as you, quote, are the publisher. And so the difference that occurred was through litigation was expanding what protections were in place. And talk about hopefully a little bit is why we need to rebalance it back to what I would say original purpose, which is to incentivize to do the right thing and not incentivize them to do nothing.
So what does it mean practically? Explain what it means for any of the users of Facebook or YouTube or some of these other networks.
Well, what it means is that, I mean, it's really a platform liability protection. So from a user's perspective, the users can still be held legally and civilly liable for what they post. So it really doesn't protect the users. That's misinformation. It protects the platforms. And so one of the outcomes of all this is that you have companies that have grown very big, like Facebook and others, that have no economic incentive to clean up their sites. Now, they may feel we don't want to have drug sales, we don't want to have illegal drug sales, we don't want to have human trafficking. I believe they truly don't want those things, but from a business standpoint, from an economic standpoint, there's no economic incentive for them to do anything because it's a cost center. So if they have to spend $100 million on cleaning up their site, that's going to cut into their profits. It's not that they want human trafficking on their site per se, but they don't want to spend the extra money that may take in order to clean it up.
I've been asked by some of our viewers to turn off my mic while you're talking, so hopefully that's a little. So that people can't sue Facebook for whatever Facebook's doing. We're seeing moment of death videos. There was a woman who was a journalist who was murdered, and on the video, she was killed on video, and it went up, and her father's been trying to have it taken down. He finds these videos and confronts them on YouTube and on Facebook. He was told it's newsworthy, and he'd have to report every single one of them every single time. As the networks don't face liability for that, or the live massacre in New Zealand, or all of the hate and radicalization and false fake news and political craziness. They can do pretty much what they want, and no one can make them stop. And it has an international implication too, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It does. Well, I think the other thing to realize is that some folks like to say Section 230 is the most important law we have for free speech. But I would say actually the First Amendment is probably the most important law we have for free speech. But the reality is that Section 230 also creates a disincentive for speech. For example, you had one of the parents of the kids who were shot up in Connecticut in the school, who was harassed online on LinkedIn. That this is no one was ever killed in Sandy Hook, and this is big conspiracy theory. And so when he tried to get Facebook and others to take it down, they said no, we don't have to. So they got off. So Section 230 can actually be a hindrance to free speech. It can really incentivize others to come after you, knowing that there's nothing that you can do to force the platforms to take it down. And that to me is a little bit scary because people are going to be intimidated. You saw what happened in some of these other cases in terms of people on dating apps and dating websites. And so there's a lot of things that we need to look carefully at in terms of reforming 230. I'm not advocating getting rid of 230. I think there's some really great pieces of 230. What I'm advocating for is that we need to think about where we want the internet to go in the future. What type of responsibilities do we want from our platforms, and how can we all work together to make the internet safe, secure, and sustainable for all?
I like the safe, secure, and sustainable for all. I'm going to use that somewhere and pretend it's mine.
Oh, you can. I've been using it for too long now.
Oh, okay. It's like the filter between your ears that I invented 20 years ago that everybody else is claiming. So who knows? But as we look at this, if somebody's doing something that would be illegal in the UK or would be illegal in other locations, Section 230 has been put into trade agreements and to treaties as well, so that you can't sue even outside of the United States. So we've taken away rights from people outside of the US, not just within the US.
Well, it's part of the USMCA, US-Mexican Canadian Trade Agreement right now, which hasn't been enacted. It's part of the US-Japan Trade Agreement. And they're pushing it to be part of the WTO, World Trade Organization treaty. And so there are groups, Silicon Valley and others, trying to expand these protections of immunity worldwide. But the scary part was that the Electronic Frontier Foundation said back in January of 2018, when we were working on FOSTA-SESTA, that they wanted to get these into trade agreements to tie the hands of Congress. And I think as we're having these important debates about the scope of Section 230, what we should be doing with 230, how it should be crafted, I don't think Congress's hand should be tied by trade agreements or at the WTO with the World Trade Organization's treaties. I think Congress needs to have a full debate. There's a lot of concerns on a variety of issues around 230 that have been expressed. And I just think that we need to make sure that Congress has a full runway and options to look at as we consider these issues in the near future.
I think it's important that Congress has the time and ability to do anything these days. They seem to be very tied up in one issue. And I'm in the UK a lot, and Parliament's just tied up on a different one issue. But if Congress is going to step in, they need to recognize we need privacy protections. And this, although it might sound like privacy, really isn't privacy at all. It has to do with content, what's appearing, what's showing, and what can come down. So some of it may relate to privacy. It might be information about you that you don't want out there. But it's far bigger than that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, this is all part of in my view, sort of the creation of the internet into a dark net. If you can't, this gets into the issue of being anonymous online, which I think has some merit, but overall, bad people are the ones who are going to be anonymous. The issue of end-to-end encryption, digital currencies like Libra and Libra that Facebook is talking about. All these issues are really interrelated. The who is going dark because of GDPR, privacy proxies going dark because of GDPR. All these issues that are surrounded is just making the internet get darker and darker. And I think to the detriment of consumers. You want transparency. You want to make sure, for example, in the United States, we have a Fourth Amendment to ensure you don't have illegal search and seizures. You want to do all that. But the right to be anonymous is actually not good for the safety and security of Americans. And I think that's what Congress has to realize, that this is a bigger debate about what future we want, where you have access to information, protecting the individual's privacy, but at the same time ensuring that we create a safe environment.
We're now slipping into the next issue, which is end-to-end encryption, and our good friends at Facebook who are trying to have about 15 million images of child pornography and video child pornography a year behind something that's going to keep law enforcement from being able to find it, find the people, and find the children. So there are all these issues that we look at in internet governance, and 230 is a big part of it, because what it said to the providers is, do what you want, don't do what you want, don't worry about it, you don't have to answer to anybody. So I've had some meetings on the Hill where I was asked to come in and talk to people, both at the Senate and at Congress, asking me if digital best practices, conduct, might work if we could make it a precursor to a Section 230 applying. So follow all of these rules, and if you do all these things, then we're not going to be liable for the things you couldn't possibly find or might come at you faster than you expected. Are you hearing that too, Rick?
Well, there's a lot of ideas on how to fix 230. And I think what we need to do, there's sort of three groups out there. There are those who say Section 230, like the 10 Commandments, is written in stone and can't be changed. There are those who are on the other side who say we need to get rid of Section 230. And then there's those of us in the middle who want to find common ground to achieve a common good. And I think that's the group that's going to sit down, put their heads together. We've done this in the past on like can spam, in other areas where it was very contentious, but about consumer safety, on consumer privacy. And we came with some, not perfect solutions, but good solutions. And I think we can do that again. It's going to take a will, the will of folks sitting around the table who want to do this. But if you're going to be a bomb thrower, if you're going to say, oh, if you want changes to Section 230, you're anti-technology, that's a bunch of BS. Just because you want a safe, secure, sustainable internet doesn't mean you're anti-tech. I think technology has tremendous benefits. We all do. That's why I love the Internet Association doing their puppy tour. Yes, there's great things about the internet, and we all agree on those. But what we're focused on is how do we create even a better internet? And that should be the goal of the folks. And the name calling and saying you're anti-tech because you want 230 changes doesn't move the dial. In fact, I think the more they do that, the more it helps those of us who want changes, because it shows that they are out of touch with reality.
Out of touch with reality and out of touch with the users. I think so many users are unhappy with what they're seeing. They log in and there's misinformation and disinformation and malinformation and hype and radicalization and hate, plus all of the violence, all of the things we're seeing. And the networks are making money off of these, because the more sensational these are, the more eyeballs they're getting. And that means more ad revenue. It means more attention. It means more users. Even if we're appalled and we're merely looking at it the way people do at a car crash as you're going by, they're making money and making more money off of it. And people testified to Congress saying, we care about you more than anything. I just want to say liar, liar, pants on fire, and more than I can say.
Yeah, they do make revenue off of the eyeballs. I think that was a big change that we saw. This is a horrible analogy, but one I think hits the point, which is in the early days of the internet, it was all subscription based. So AOL could go up and really say during the Section 230 debate, if people don't like what we're doing, they go somewhere else. They leave, our business fails. When the business model switched to advertising and targeted advertising, all of a sudden, if I was selling white sheets, it didn't matter if it was going to white supremacists and newlyweds. as long as they were interested in white sheets and they got the eyeball and the profit. But once the business model changed to 230 of advertising, and it did create this incentive to have as many eyeballs no matter what, that changed how 230 was going to be implemented, because anything that made friction, that caused friction to that business model was a problem in that cost center. And again, there's no economic incentive to basically do the right thing because it's going to cost you. You have to really want to be at the corporate level. And again, going back to move fast and break things, that means you want a frictionless business environment. And Section 230 created that frictionless environment, but also created all the problems that we're seeing right now with Facebook and Twitter and Google and so forth, and the problems that they're facing up on the Hill. A lot of it is because they just ignored the morality side and looked more on growth.
Tito had asked if this applies as a unique law outside of the United States. I know it applies through trade agreements and other issues. And then there are laws saying if you get a judgment that you couldn't have gotten under 230, you can't enforce it in the United States. But are you aware of any country that has its own law that's similar to 230, giving internet providers immunity from lawsuits?
No, there's no. Well, the Canadians will say that the way their laws are, they have a specific 230 like provision, but they have stated that they're already in compliance with the trade agreement. Mexico asked for a 3-year waiver before they implemented 230. The fact that they're pushing this in Japan has said that their laws, well, the USTR has said that the Japanese laws comply with 230. There's actually some controversy on that they probably don't, and Japan will probably have to change its laws. I think in the EU, they're in a different direction. I'm not as fearful on a trade agreement with either the UK or the EU that they're going to get Section 230 like language in. The EU is in a completely different place than the US on these issues of responsibility, as we see in privacy and in other areas. Some of my friends in Silicon Valley will say that's because they want to create an unlevel playing field, market barriers. But again, there's a historic reasoning behind where the EU is on privacy and other issues that we just don't have here in the States. But again, I think that there's really no other country that's done it. I don't think we actually, some of the argument is made that because of Section 230, that's why we dominate in the area of technology and the platforms. I think that there's some truth to that, but I also think the truth is the way we structure our businesses. Our bankruptcy laws are very helpful for startups where you can start over. That's been a more critical factor than Section 230 that doesn't get recognized as much. Our free speech that we have. This is the First Amendment itself, and also intellectual property. The fact that you can create something and profit off of it without it being stolen, except for maybe on some of the social networking sites, but that has been very helpful. So there's a whole host of factors, and it's not just Section 230. Again, I think that's a very misleading statement and argument.
One of the things that I've noticed, and that I have changed a lot over the last 25 years, I was all for as much openness on the internet as possible because 25 years ago, the voices were trying to shut it down. It was a matter of adult sexual content. It was good, it was bad for children. Everyone was trying to shut it down. So I found myself, I think you and I were often on different sides of this issue, firmly trying to support an open internet because I was afraid that it was early enough and young enough that it would die. Now, as I've been doing this longer and protecting people for 25 years, I'm becoming perhaps older and more conservative. Maybe because I'm a grandmother, maybe because I'm just older and more conservative these days. But I spoke at Stanford on the digital e-commerce summit, and I was on a panel on 230. And I'm used to people thinking that what I do is wonderful because I donate my time protecting children and protecting people online. And I was in everybody's crosshairs. The audience was packed. They stood there and they kept pointing fingers at me saying, we deserve more free speech online than we get under the law in the US. And I said, well, huh? Why? Why do you get more free speech online than you do in brick and mortar in the US? And they just said, well, we should. That's the only way to do it. And that, because I said so tends to be the argument on the other side here. But as we look at all of this, we're not absolutely promised anonymity. We're not promised that we can have end-to-end encryption and that what we say with legal process can't be pierced. Somehow we think that the internet is magic and that we're entitled to all these rights that don't exist in real life. Is this the fairyland that we're looking at?
Yeah, it's the other one that you always hear is the internet is borderless, and therefore we can't pass any laws, that restricts the border. And I said, what's borderless? Earth. You're up in space and you look down on Earth. There are no borders, but there is sovereignty, and we're not going to give up our sovereignty. And other countries are not going to do it. The Chinese aren't going to do it. The Russians, the Europeans. Sovereignty is very important to protect your citizens from harm. And so we're not going to give that up because of a new technology. We didn't give it up when the phone came out, the telephone came out, or anything else. We didn't give up our sovereignty. We try to create laws and rules, regulations to try to protect ourselves. But it's also funny when people talk about the splintering of the internet, and the privacy advocates, like, we need to have, tough laws in the states, and you have to make sure, California has their law, and we shouldn't preempt state laws because probably these are the EFFs and the CDs of the world. And I always laugh at that because they are basically saying that states should have sovereignty. They should have different laws. They should have stronger laws. If the internet is borderless and data transmission is borderless, then really there shouldn't be any privacy laws. Yet we do have privacy laws, and we should have privacy laws. And so it's always convenient for them to talk about the borderless internet, except for in the issues that they want to try to stop or protect. So I do think that we are at a stage in the evolution of the internet, you said in the early days, where we're coming to grips with some of the great things that the internet has brought, but also the negative. We're much more educated now. Back then, and we were working on these issues, Parry, you and I, back in the mid 90s and early 90s and late 90s. In early 2000s, we were guessing a lot. I mean, we had a vision. We thought we were making the right question, or making the right decisions on a lot of these issues. And over time, we found that there were gaps, that things were not turning out exactly as we had thought. And now it's time to recalibrate, to readjust where we are and what type of world we want. The internet is no different than bricks and mortars. And I hate that idea. And somehow, because it's online, it's different. It's not. You need to have laws. And we faced this when I was with Fox. The Hollywood studios need to change their business models. And I was thinking, what business model don't we use? We use advertising. We use subscription. We use, think of a business model that's out there that we haven't used, except for what they wanted, which was give it away for free. But I never thought investing $100 million into a movie and giving it away for free was a very good business model. Maybe in Silicon Valley when it's all about eyeballs and no revenue. But when you're a more mature business, you have to actually show profit at the end of the day. And so a lot of things have changed, and a lot of companies are stepping up. You have companies like Microsoft and IBM and Oracle. You go down the list, and they're doing the right things. They're trying to figure this out. Some may say, oh, that's because they feel that they're being beaten by GAFA, and probably some of that is true. But at the end of the day, a lot of folks are saying that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, and I'm hoping that companies, the more mature companies, really step up to the plate and work with us instead of just trying to block some changes that are probably going to happen anyway.
There we go. I think you named a lot of the companies that we agree are the more mature and looking at this, and not because of techlash, just because of what's right. So the IBMs and Microsofts and Oracles of the world, I think Cisco's stepping in a lot of places. I think a lot of them are trying to figure out what to do and not relying on this law to allow them to avoid responsibility for what they are doing. I know one of the questions that's come up, I thought we had addressed, but I'll address it again. this isn't really a matter of owning your own data or privacy laws. It's a matter of how the operations are functioning within the providers. Are they taking down what they should take down? If there's cyberbullying, cyber stalking, trafficking, sale of drugs, sale of opioids, sale of whatever, are they policing their own networks to make sure that they're not containing things that they shouldn't contain and that they're not promoting things they shouldn't promote? Am I right?
Well, I think it's more, I don't say it's more about conduct than content. And the view that we took in the FOSTA assessment is that a website that is knowingly facilitating human trafficking should not be able to profit off of that, that there should be legal recourse to go after those types of sites that are making money off harming others. And I think that's how we have to look at these issues. It's really the conduct. If you're engaged in illegal activity online or you're facilitating illegal activity online, you should be held accountable. It should be either through civil or criminal. And that was the other misinformation on the FOSTA-SESTA legislation. You know, my friends would argue on the other side that we already have federal laws and we don't need to do any more. But the reality was that FOSTA-SESTA had nothing to do with federal law, because what it did is provide local and state law enforcement with the legal tools to go after websites that were knowingly facilitating human trafficking, which, because of Section 230, were blocked from those investigations. So when they talk about how Backpage.com was shut down without FOSTA-SESTA, that's absolutely correct. It was, and it was a federal, legal regime, but it took a Senate investigation to shut them down. And we're not going to have Senate investigations on every website that may be engaged in criminal activity. That's why we have state and local law enforcement. These are the same state and local law enforcement, the state AGs, that the privacy advocates say should have the power to enforce privacy laws and data breach laws. So if they can enforce that and they can control data and no one's suing, and also make sure you don't have, litigation, civil litigation on these things. But those same privacy advocates who are saying we shouldn't change 230 because we need to have one federal law are in a completely different place when it comes to privacy. What I thought we should look at is this CAN-SPAM Act, which created a federal regime, but also allowed state and local law enforcement to go after spammers. And I think it's worked pretty well for the most part. Again, not perfect. Allowed civil litigation. I was at the U.S. Chamber at the time. It's very hard for us to swallow is civil litigation against businesses, but it does create a balance in how you structure that. So I just think that we're at that time where we can make a real difference. Again, FOSTA-SESTA was, I think, the first time that Silicon Valley had lost in a policy fight. They lost badly, 97-2 in the Senate. It would have been 98, but Senator McCain was sick. And his wife, however, was very helpful to us. And then I think it was like 393-20 or something in the House. So overwhelming support for trying to fix these things. But the other side kept saying, oh, this is about, federal law already exists. And that's true. But we have to look at what can state and local law enforcement do to help in terms of improving the safety and security and sustainability of the internet.
There it goes. We're talking about FOSTA and SESTA, but there are a lot of people who have no idea what that is.
Oh, sorry.
Could you do sort of an elevator description of what FOSTA and SESTA are and why it's important to us and especially to children?
Yeah, so what happened was there was state AGs and some advocates and survivors of human trafficking that wanted to hold accountable a company called Backpage.com that was posting ads of sex workers, and many of those ads were of underage people who were being trafficked. And when the state AGs went to go after them, and the survivors, and also the parents of those who didn't survive, which were the hardest cases, when they went to try to go after Backpage, they were blocked at the courthouse step. So there was a great documentary that I highly recommend that Mary Maggio did called I Am Jane Doe. It's on Netflix. And it gives the whole history of sort of the Backpage story and what FOSTA-SESTA tried and I think has been successful in doing in terms of protecting individuals. But the purpose was really, as I stated at the beginning, is to give state and local law enforcement the legal tools so that they can see and go after websites that were knowingly facilitating human trafficking.
I'm trying to add I am Jane Doe so that people will know where it is. And is it on Netflix?
Yes, it's on Netflix.
So
And it's an amazing documentary on the history. The interesting part, it ends where there's no legislation. And that's kind of where I came in. I volunteered my time to help about 150 anti-human trafficking survivor groups put together a legislative strategy that would get enacted. Amazing groups from the National Center of Missing Exploited Children, Polaris, down the list of who's who. Donna Rice Hughes, Enough is Enough. There's just a lot of different organizations, and we beat back, literally millions of dollars being trying to stop that legislation because we're on the right side of history, and we had committed individuals who were passionate about fixing the problem, and they volunteered their time as well and resources to really make a difference. It was one of probably the most fulfilling legislative efforts I've ever been a part of, and I've been part of a lot of them in terms of outcome and individuals and focus. And it really was just an amazing, amazing opportunity to work with some great people on a very important cause. And I continue that effort.
I'm a little slow on this technology. I'm not really a techie. I just play one on TV. Rick, I really appreciate your time and letting me make you my first guinea pig as I try to figure out how this works. And
well, hopefully some people are watching. I always enjoy my conversations with you anyway, Parry. So it's been great.
A lot of Europeans actually on this, and a couple from Japan who will probably be looking at the equivalent laws and see how 230 is. And I'm happy to connect them to you. But I appreciate this as we try to protect people online and we try to have people assert their rights and try to make the internet the kind of place they want to go to. We need to have lawyers who protect us. We need to have laws that define it. And we need companies with the ethics and integrity to stand up for what's right. So I'm part of Vint Cerf's people-centered internet, and Vint invented the internet, and Vint turns around every once in a while and says, what did we create? He's a co-inventor of the internet, but I saw the look, but all of them, Tim Berners-Lee, everyone's looking at this saying, did we create the monster?
Well, even Jerry Berman, who was the founder of CDA, the Center for Democracy and Technology, and if you look at Section 230 and the history of 230, there can't be a story written without Jerry Berman. He has even stated that 230 needs to be reformed. He has seen that it's gone in a different direction than he had envisioned, and he had promised where it was going to go. So there's a lot of us, and there's people like you, Parry. Thank you for all the work that you do. Because without your insight and without your determination, we would not be where we are today on the positive side of things. And so, don't underestimate the power that you have and the great work that you do.
That was good. And obviously my check cleared, paid for the $20 endorsement instead of the normal 10, but I really do appreciate that. And I know a lot of great people, you know a lot of great people, and I was fortunate enough that LinkedIn allowed me LinkedIn Live. So hopefully you and others will help us share things we've learned over the last 25 years, because if we don't understand history, we're bound to repeat it. And and as we're looking at all of this, our kids are worth it. All of us are worth it. We shouldn't have to have people with more power than we have decide how they're going to destroy our reputations or affect our well-being. So isn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I think we've got any other questions we didn't get to, Alan? Okay, so we're learning how to handle comments because LinkedIn Live doesn't allow comments on the same screen. So we're working with a couple computers here. Thank you so much, Rick. And how can people find you?
Thanks.
They can find you on LinkedIn.
I only do LinkedIn. I don't really do Twitter. I don't have enough time in my day. Twitter and LinkedIn. So I post most all my stuff on LinkedIn. I just think that is a way, mostly because that's where policymakers are and staff, and folks who are interested in these issues. So I tend to focus just specifically on LinkedIn for comments. So if you want to reach out to me, you can find me there.
Good, and I'll make sure everybody has that link. Thank you again for your time and patience. Love you lots.
All right, you too. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.